Well, greetings. I had most of 4 days down in the Keys just this weekend past, and it was glorious. 80, clear. I come home and a day later it's 36 degrees colder. I'm ready for winter to be over, and the bad news is we got more coming to where in the Ohio Valley. Greetings again. Having watched the tour video, I can affirm that you indeed have a proper cellar from which to do your expert curmudgeonry. Thank you again for the video. Well, you Patreons are going to get some more shorter videos. I'm just going to do a stack of games or a few shelves or something like that and do a few of them. Something to keep you interested. Let's see. On the longevity of the series, I've been around since number 250 and said I would look forward to 350. So soon I guess I'll have to look forward to 420, 450. You can look to... Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one myself. Love to hear the anecdotes about Mr. Trampier. Yeah, Tramp. His art is definitely a personal favorite here as well. One bright side of the 50th anniversary products they juiced out is they have several products with his lich, which is just a classic. I think you'll agree. I do. They have it on t-shirts and stickers as expected, but they also produced it in a limited series of miniatures based on the original Monster Manual. It's a beaut. Do you have a singular favorite among Tramp's work? Did he game much in those days? Well, my favorite was the Christmas back cover that he did with the original gang in the sleigh being pulled by 8 tiny green dragons. Did he game? Yeah, we played a lot of World War II miniatures on my sand table. Many hours. What else he played, I'm not sure. Well, of course, he played Titan. Because he and Jason, they developed and designed it. But other than that, I couldn't tell you. Okay, a report from the school. Return to the semester in the school club has been hindered by the cold weather. Oh, the cold weather blast most of us received recently. Yeah, it's kind of screwed up everything. But we're poised with the 3 groups ready to go. I do have a tidbit to share with any potential or fellow club sponsors out there. Recently, I found the Games Workshop Warhammer Alliance, which is an established program to help start Warhammer hobby clubs in schools and libraries. They'll send you a healthy supply of minis and paints to use with the students or participants at no cost. If you have an RPG club already, it's a nice addition. You'll have some nice Citadel paints left over for any other miniatures. Well, that's good to know. I wouldn't be surprised if there were others that, I don't know, perhaps somebody like Reaper might do something like that. I don't know. But it's certainly worth looking into if you're interested. It's, that's good. It's good for both sides. It's good for Warhammer because they get the publicity, and it's good for the recipients of the gifts because they get a better taste of what the hobby's about. Speaking of the more miniature-focused games, have you ever seen or heard about Trench Crusade? It exploded on Kickstarter and gained popularity very quickly. If not for the game mechanics, for the aesthetics. The story in a nutshell is that during the Crusades, a heretical band of Templars unleashed the forces of hell upon Earth, and now the war has raged for 800 years, and it's 1914. So, of course, everyone is fighting in a mix of Crusade-era armor mixed with World War I trench warfare and weapons. I don't know about playing it, but people are making some wild tables for it. It's certainly a novel approach. It's a novel setting. Might be pretty interesting. It might be. I can't say. It could well work out real well. Stay warm and have a great one. Yeah, I wish. Not much warm going on. A way to reduce equipment would be carry a one-handed warhammer and use as a hammer for pitons and for hammering a wooden stake into a vampire's heart. Well, I have no problem with somebody telling me they've got a hand hammer, like you have a hand axe. A one-handed weapon and useful for specific small impact or small area or small effects. I wouldn't have a problem with that at all, and let them carry it on their belt and don't really count it as equipage or encumbrance. I deal with encumbrance of stuff you pick up after. It's, what you pick after. You're already equipped. Whatever your equipment is, within reason, you've accustomed to. It's like carrying a pack and full equipment. That's why they run you up and down the hills in boot camp to do that, so that you get used to carrying large loads. They become second nature, and then that means you can carry more shit. And anything beyond that becomes encumbrance. Concerning the ongoing comments about dwarven mines and mines in general, I'd like to recommend a YouTube channel called Ghost Town Living. The episodes follow Brent Underwood as he explores and partially reopens the Cerro Gordo silver mine near Death Valley, California. The channel also goes into detail about the building and design processes of running a mine, which would be of interest to people to want to learn more about adding mines in their campaigns. Well, thanks for the tip. If you're interested, there it is for you. Ghost Town Living. Now, next one again on encumbrance. I'm not even sure how common packs would have been. Historically, it seems blanket rolls. Blankets probably will have available were pretty common, and your stuff got rolled up inside them and then tied together with twine or thin rope. Shoulder bags too. Even things like the Scottish kilt, which was really large, like 20 or 30 feet of wool, were essentially both your wet weather poncho and your sleeping bag. Cloaks serve the same function, both poncho and kilt. They certainly wouldn't be carrying around the 75 to 125 pounds of gear modern soldiers are forced to carry with the aid of some really high-tech gear and vehicles or helicopters. The loads are still backbreaking. Well, it's funny. Take the American Civil War, for example. The art and the contemporary accounts are very different depending upon whether the color was gray or blue. Blue, they were issued backpacks, and they were issued rolls that went around them, and everybody had one, a backpack. Maybe that was because it was uniformity, but they had them. Now, Confederates, if they could get, when you see contemporary drawings and that of Confederates, some will have backpacks. I would consider them probably be the lucky few, because the rest of them have the good old blanket slung around one shoulder, around the neck and over a shoulder, down on the side. The loose ends up tied over the shoulder. It would certainly be effective, but I can't think that given the option of a nice sturdy pack that would hold much more stuff without worry of breakage, I can't see that they wouldn't have opted for the packs if they could have gotten them. If you watch the Sharp series of films that were made, they're constantly snagging up French backpacks because they were much better made than the shoddy British ones. Given that many types of armor preclude the use of a backpack, I still got to think that, given an option, And the choice, not saying a blanket wouldn't work, but a blanket is a lot more difficult to get used to. Backpack has straps that somewhat evenly distribute the weight, whereas a blanket, the loose ends are tied up around your shoulder and all the weight's down along your hip. Anyway, hell, even wearing armor is questionable. I've seen modern plate panels, and you don't want to have it on for long. As soon as you're back in a safe vehicle or location, you're damn happy to get it off. I don't like plate in D&D. I just don't like plate armor because of all its impracticalities for an adventurer. Now, if you make your living about top of a giant horse with a long pointy thing, knocking other people off their giant horses while they're trying to knock you off with their pointy thing, plate armor is a good thing to have. But it certainly does not serve an adventurer well. Partial chain is, just a chain hauberk is really, with maybe little add-on pieces here and there, if you know your armor and your DM is into that. I think that's about as bulky and heavy and cumbersome and restrictive, or lack thereof, that I would have. Again, if the DM has you in a desert setting under the blazing sun, you're not going to be wearing that chain. You're certainly not going to be wearing plate. Now, plate is many things to many people. I'm not talking about being encased in a solid metal jousting plate suit. But plate armor is still the plates that would go on shoulders or on the breast or on the back. Those they attract and they hold a whole lot of heat, and they would be oppressive. So they wouldn't do you any good at all if you were in a hot, humid, steamy environment. And your water consumption, yes, would go way up. Can't imagine how terrible you'd wear something medieval plate armor to chainmail someplace other than Northern Europe. It would be miserable in both the heat and cold, and if you try to wear it while marching on an adventure, I'd wish you wouldn't last long at all before I'm being exhausted, and maybe a heat casualty. Yeah, and that's why the Romans, in those periods of time when they had various amounts of plate or chain, they took the chain off when they were marching through Syria. Put it on when it was time to do battle. Some of them always had it on, and they rotated the centuries. And I'm sure they peeled off that, wet chain, and were glad to let it dry, and let the sweat dry off their bodies. Except for that chainmail red Sonya you seem to wear. That armored bikini probably doesn't weigh much more or cause too much heat stroke. Of course, it seems like it would chafe and pinch in some very sensitive areas. As a matter of fact, I once had an occasion to talk to, there was a young woman who, for over the course of several Gen Cons, was hired by different companies. At each con she'd be working somewhere else, and we called her Chainmail Babe. And oh my God, it's been 20 years. I knew her name at the time. I can't remember it now. And she wore it well, I'll say. And we got to chatting while she was killing time at a booth I was at, or whatever. And I made the fact that I bet there were certainly some drawbacks with chain and female anatomy. And she allowed as how, oh yeah, there was extra padding down below where you couldn't see it, and she had big round bandages over her areola and nipples because the chainmail pinched. So, yeah, in real life I can attest that I was told that, yes, indeed it does pinch in sensitive places. It really recently came up in a Facebook Beckme group that there is no benefit for a wizard to have an intelligence above 16. 16 gives the 10% plus the 10% bonus on experience. A 17 and 18 will each only give you an extra language. I know Mulvey and Mence are basic. With Holmes, the higher intelligence gave a higher chance to know the first level spells. This rule was discarded by the later Red Box by Mulvey and then Menser. Other than extra language, is there any benefit of a 17 or 18? There might be in other versions, but I do not know. I wouldn't think there should be. If I rolled an 18, I would put it in strength for fighter for a prerequisite. Would you think that an 18 is in intelligence for a wizard's prereq would make sense? But during character creation, it does not work out that way. Thanks for being... Okay. Well, all right. Number one, it depends on how you generate. If you generate, roll, 7 sets of dice, discard the worst one, and then assign them where you want, that's one thing. If you go straight old school, you roll strength, you roll them right down the line, and that's what you have. Now, the character might not be playable, you wad it up, you roll another one. But we didn't play with the luxury of shifting stats around. So if you ended up with a wizard with a high wisdom and a high intelligence, there were a couple of benefits. It's most a case of how often did somebody roll a wizard with a 17 or an 18 intelligence. Again, it's in your philosophy of what you think, what combination of stats, weaks and lows, and weaks and strongs, what combination you think is ideal to play. I don't know that there is a hard and fast rule. I do know that if you play the old way and say, okay, you roll 6 sets of dice, and those are it, that's what you got to play with. It was a lot harder, but certainly in the beginning where there was no alternative, I felt it was a ton of fun working around one of your character's poor stats. Having a real high intelligence, I guess, is going to be part of whether or not it's a boon would be up to your DM. I would probably give some advantage in some circumstances for having a high intelligence, 17 or 18. Particularly if a wizard's trying to read a language that's very close to one he already knows, I would give him an extra, 5 or 10% chance to figure it out and be able to read it. Why not? It's fantasy. Okay, now I have a very short comment that was left. I used to love slot cars. Well, I did too. I remember when the very first Aurora sets came out when I was just a kid, which was, God knows, a long time, 50 years ago, 55 years ago, I think they came out. And I was into larger scale slot cars when I was in the Navy. We were rebuilding, building our own armatures and building chassis with stiff copper wire and soldering, soldering up our own chassis and what have you, making them faster and lighter and more flexible. But the cars that I have now are slotless. The track is about that wide and has a little short lip on either side. And the cars have 3 different positions where you can hook up a contact. There's a common one that's the same on both. And then there's an A and a B, and one car gets hooked up as an A and the other one gets hooked up as a B. And that enables you to change lanes. It's different, believe me. You hit the nail on the head about publishing a Kickstarter. Doesn't actually crowdfund or make it easier to find projects anymore. It's just another distribution model. It all starts with knowing an artist who can work with you, building an email list, staying up after your kids go to bed, trying to moonlight your way into writing something 6 people might read, printing playtest copies of work when everyone's at. I mean, it's a rough business these days. Yeah, it is. You have to crowdfund. And it has to be in such a way that the people that know that they can send in your money no matter how hard you hose them, intentionally or not, they have no standing, no status to try and get it back. Just, paint your name with vile epithets. It's tough. I know a couple of people who can tell you with very great degree of accuracy whether or not a given Kickstarter is likely to fund, well, once they get up and running, and predict with alarming accuracy where they'll stop. And they've done it for themselves, for their own Kickstarters, for their own businesses, but they're the 2 best that I know. Yeah, it's tough. And if you can make a really interesting, intriguing short video, like Exploding Cats did, well, you can sell millions of dollars in Kickstarter for a game that's really pretty weak. Marketing. And it is. It's a tough business nowadays. All right. Here we go. It's the history time again. We're Bear. Back in the early 90s, the game company I belonged to, the Strategic Game Society in Carbondale, that's a familiar name, held a convention at the Sooner Center of Southern Illinois University in the basement, as was appropriate. I remember one year we held an anniversary game for the original members of some landmark or other. Could have been 94 and a 20-year anniversary. What sticks out to me is that when all the gamers who came down to play that adventure were talking about and catching up, they kept calling one dude We're Bear. I'm pretty sure we had Tom Wam at that convention as a guest regularly. I wouldn't be surprised if your august presence was there as well. I was always astonished how my formative years as a young gamer, by 94 I was 25, was spent in the cradles of the game that had been such a big influence in my life. Do you have any recollection of that convention? No, I was never notified of any convention. When I got to Carbondale in 74, or it would have been the fall of 73 is when I started, there was a group I found out about on campus of 6 or 7 guys that played board games. And they were just a games club. And I went to one of they met at a room in the student center. And I was excited because I was all up for playing board games and minis. A chance to learn minis. And there was only a few of them, and they had no name. And so at the next activities fair, because we were in quarters then, at the next activities fair, we got a table, and Tom Wam let us use some of his, there were actually 7 Years' War miniatures, but we told people walking by it was a Napoleonic battle. Nobody knew. And we signed up people to play more just board games and minis is what we were doing. And we doubled our club size from 7 to 14, and over the next couple of weeks, it topped out around 20. And these are just people interested in board games and minis, some of whom already even played some were just interested. So before that games fair, I sat down and I kind of smooshed my way in to the club. I was a long-haired veteran, and so I was, just back from Nam and newly married, and so I was kind of exotic. And so I kind of influenced a lot of what happened next. And one was that we had to have a name, so I came up with Strategic Game Society, and I developed a logo that they're still using today. We went from there. The very first group was after I'd gone to Gen Con in the summer of '74, came back and started a D&D group that later became the playtesting group that I worked closely with Gary with. And one of our monumental players was Weirbeer, one of the best, one of the most fun, one of the most stalwart. And so I'm sure he was legendary. Tom didn't play very much when I was there. He would play once in a while, but Tom wasn't really into role-playing yet as such. And there was a whole couple of quarters where Tom wasn't even there. Tom didn't go to school on a steady basis. He'd do a couple of quarters, and he'd drop out for a couple of quarters. And, I don't know. I think it was lack of interest. His family was, his father was an MD, so he wasn't got to go out and work up some more tuition money. But yes, you grew up in one of the cradles, the unknown petri dishes that produced D&D. And we had 2 or 3 of they started as non-player characters, were created and written by some of the people in that group. So it was fun times, heady times. I collect the early modules. Is there a specific series, or BXL or whatever, or single module that you feel stands out from the others? How about Dragon Magazine? Any memorable article you remember publishing while you were involved? Just curious. Well, for the modules, of course, there's the Temple of Elemental Evil, which was the ultimate horror fest. For the series, I was quite proud of the G series because nobody had ever done anything like that before, and we paved the way for all the great and not so great modules that followed later. I don't recall right offhand. I've been thinking about this for a little while this evening. I don't really recall a single Dragon article that stood out above the rest. I had lots of favorites, and as the editor, I had I got excited about whatever was the big one in that issue. So I had lots of big ones. Now, there was an article I published in Little Wars that I was very proud of, that Tramp and I had developed, basically through our hours and hours and hours of tank games, where I had eliminated the need for an umpire or a judge. Because when I first started playing minis, there had to be a third party to adjudicate. Did it hit? Didn't it hit? Because that's the way it's always been done. Even the original Prussian war games and what have you had judges and observers. So through our play, I had developed a series of possibilities for you to use dice to come up with two fairly equally balanced units. One Russian, one German. It was East Front. And I was very proud of that. I did a lot of reading, and we did a lot of playing to come up with that. On the subject of finding inspiration from literature, my daughter introduced me to a book and series, The Bear and the Nightingale, by Catherine Arden. It's based around Russian folklore rather than European. The setting is something I've never encountered before. Brilliant! Brilliant! It's so much fun to find something you don't have. To find something that you can explore and learn for real, not pretend you don't know what's behind that. Wonderful. There's some great Russian folklore. Some great Russian monsters, not great big, 300 hit point things, but really scary dudes. So, wonderful. I encourage every DM to try and find stuff like that. Books that are based in a milieu in which you're not real knowledgeable. And when you do and dive into it, then you develop an adventure for one night. You get to enjoy all the players going, what in the hell is going on? And hey, we don't get enough, we being DMs, we don't get enough opportunities to enjoy that. My kids, who are in their 30s, are all readers. Our bedtime ritual was always the bedtime story. I read them The Hobbit, Lloyd Alexander's Chronicles of Prydain, The Witch in the Wardrobe series, etc. Don't know if that contributed to their love of books and reading, but I guess it didn't hurt. No, it certainly did not. One of my great-grands loves being read to, and I'm going to start, my wife has been doing it, I'm going to start reading to him and helping him learn the words and stuff like that, and I go slow, because I hope to kindle that in him. And it certainly didn't hurt him. Okay, the bulette came from episode number 9 of the 1966 Japanese TV series Ultraman. That is where that monster that the people in Hong Kong cast injected molded, or wasn't even just plastic. If it wasn't last episode, which I have to say, I'll stop here right now and say I thought it was brilliant work by Jim putting that together, and there's a whole bunch of stuff there I never saw before because I wasn't watching that comic or that cartoon when it was being done. But anyway, it was either last episode or it will be again in this episode. He dropped a link to it. It was added to the show notes. So if you didn't see it, go back and look again. I seem to remember that in B1 or B2, players could find an exquisitely crafted set of thieves' tool. Maybe it was B5. They added a +5 to some skill checks. No magic, just a quality treasure. I have frequently done quality item pluses for 40 years. I love a sword with a couple of pluses on it that is not magic. It's just extremely well made. It's extremely sharp. High quality. Superb stuff. Well, was the sword of a prince who died 800 years ago, and that's how you found it, and it's got all these things going for it, super light, super sharp, super flexible, but there's not a trace of magic to it. I've found bull leather armor I've produced bold level armor like that, where it doesn't have any magic enchantments, but it's better than normal boiled leather armor, just because of craftsmanship. Great idea. It's a great way to throw stuff into the mix. Because no matter how many pluses you give the players with their weapons and their armor and that, there's always a bigger monster. My son showed me a recent video concerning character creation in Tunnels and Trolls. After watching it, my comment to him was, yep, that's why people still playing D&D and never heard of Tunnels and Trolls. I bear a bit, well, there's one individual that I bear personal animus to, but that's just because he's an asshole. But as to the company and that, I no longer bear any animus, but at the time I strongly disliked the game because it was nothing but a blatant ripoff. And Gary and Brian laughed it off, and I later proved to be true, and they later ate their words when it actually did become a competitor or a contender, no matter how small. 80 pounds. Wow is right. When I run a game, I enforce encumbrance, as in my opinion, encumbrance is a great equalizer. Finding a hoard of gold coin is far different than taking it with you. Yes, indeed. I've told the story. I wrote an adventure where the adventurers found an apiary of giant bees that made marvelous honey. And honey that had beneficial properties because of the plants they fed on, and a third strain that made very lethal honey because of the plants that they fed on, and therefore the honey had great value. And of course they're in the middle of a desert, and they don't have a barrel or so they came upon literally gallons and gallons and gallons of this honey with magical properties, and had very little ready-made ways to get it out of there. Same thing with a gold hoard. You can only weigh so much, and then you start going slow. That's why gems and jewelry are so much more fun and much better to find, because the value versus weight is much in favor of the value. And it is the equalizer. The little wise-ass hobbit can only carry out so much, whereas a big brute, the big meat sack that the hobbit's been poking fun at can haul out twice as much. Nah. Can you talk more about the kind of players that led to the development of the monk? I'm a judoka, and I'm finding other, I'm sorry if I butchered that, and I'm finding other martial artists see themselves more as unarmed men-at-arms. All our moves are designed to fight someone who is in armor and has a weapon, or you pull out a weapon once you get control. It goes on to why I wasn't the fighter, just given magic-style abilities like the magician that would do something besides hit, such as moves like the bulldog designed to choke someone in a helmet. That would work on a golem or other armored creature. Well, actually, it wouldn't work on a golem. Golems are not alive. They're animated. You'd have to take the golem's head off, and even then, that might not work. Why is the monk exclusively a Taoist immortal? Which are the fictional enemies of the Kung Fu movies? The monk was because Brian Bloom was fascinated with the movie Kung Fu. I think he might have had a thing for Carradine. I don't know. He was obsessed by it. And he decided he wanted a monk character. And of course, back then, the new stuff we were all making as NPCs, knowing full well that they wouldn't stay that way. And so, came up with presented me with okay, here's the monk. I think this will be cool. And we were in the midst of lots of NPCs being built into the game. So, and Kung Fu was a big deal, the TV show, and the chop socky movies were starting to see some exposure in this country. Worst mistake I ever made. I don't like the thief's strike from behind doubling stuff. I like the monk even less. At the time, it seemed like a good idea. Terrible mistake on my part, in retrospect. But Brian was fascinated by them. Shogun had ninjas in the book. It was only the book then, but the book became quite popular. And it was a nod toward them as well. Why they're Taoist immortals, I have no idea. It's the way they were designed. And the fighter wasn't giving magic style abilities because Gary did not absolutely did not want that to be part of the paradigm of the game. Fighters relied on weapons and brawn and might and being right. Magic abilities belong to priests and magicians and other suspect characters. Let's see, is that... What do you know? Almost done here. Bluegrass intro music. Bluegrass? Very appropriate for a fantasy video series, much like pink trees and green-skinned humanoids. Well, I asked them to do me something bluegrassy in the spirit of the Beverly Hillbillies. And I thought they did a magnificent job. I did it because it was a clink. What? I didn't want to do heavy organ music or anything like that. I wanted something that was a little fun, a little tongue-in-cheek, a little autobiographical. Now, on the question of bluegrass itself, I really do appreciate a lot of bluegrass music. Mainly because of its strong connection to its roots, which are Celtic. Yep, I had not seen most of those clips. I thought Jim did a brilliant job. Way to go, Jim, once again. Let me make sure now I haven't forgotten anything. Okay, so I only got a couple things left to talk about. Have them right here next to me. Okay, we've all seen this. The making of the original Dungeons and Dragons. Great big heavy tome. I got about 80 pages in it, and I was doing my best not to fall asleep because I just wasn't interested in old original pages photographed. Now, I know there are people that are. I know there are people that own some of those originals, and now they've been published. They are owning the original is diminished in value and worth. So I got to wonder about that. But anyway, so I said, okay, let's just skip to the end, being the supplements. Well, there are several things back in the back of the book concerning the supplements that just are not true. I don't know if Gary had selective memory. I don't know if Gary just didn't remember. But yes, I'm going to say that the icon did not remember or relate some of the things as they occurred. He makes a ridiculous claim about Brian having written part of a supplement, to my knowledge, after Greyhawk, and I can't say anything about Greyhawk because I wasn't there then. Brian never wrote a single word in any supplement. He might have written an introduction or a foreword. But anyway, there's a bunch of other crap that's just not right. It's not correct. So I was pretty disappointed. Now, I have another book here. ShadowDark, which has taken the RPG field by storm, as well it should. It is a very elegant reduction of rules to the basics, reduction of classes, elimination of silly shit, reduction in many ways that is boiled down fantasy role-playing to the good stuff. I really, really was impressed by it. The only Kelsey Dion, excellent job. The only negative I would say is simply that people that have played D&D for 30 years or longer are going to balk at adjusting because it's different. It's boiled down. Doesn't diminish either one of them. In fact, it adds to the elegance of the ShadowDark system. It's very elegant. It's very clean. It would be much, much easier to teach someone who's never role-played ShadowDark than it would be to teach them D&D. Yes, I said it. Beautiful system, well designed. And on that blockbuster, I'll say, Dodada Kobe. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with Tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.